This mini lecture is going to deal with utility. By the end of this mini lecture, you'll be able to define utility and distinguish total utility from marginal utility. Careful, there's going to be a formula. So, the big question here is how consumers make their best choice. For a business, it's usually pretty simple. It's so simple that we don't even really think about it. When a business is making a decision, we're like, well, did they make money? If yes, then they're happy. If not, then they're not. With people, though, we don't have a profit and loss sheet. We don't have a like a stat bar like you see in video games where either you're doing well or you're not. We talked a little bit about consumer surplus in the previous unit, and that could be a good measure. But what's consumer surplus really measuring? It's measuring how many dollars we have that we could spend. So it just sort of assumes that money can buy happiness. And we need to be a little bit more direct with the way we're measuring this. So the term that economists use for happiness is utility. This comes from John Stuart Mill, who's a dead white guy. He is the father of utilitarianism, which is a philosophical school that says the ethically right decision is the one that maximizes the happiness that is gained by people. So, total utility basically just measures total happiness. Unfortunately, it's really hard to measure happiness. There's no natural unit for it. So economists invented this term called utils. A util is thought of as a unit of happiness. Don't get too in the weeds with this. Every time you see util, U-T-I-L, every time you see that word, just think happy points. This gave me 6 utils. Oh, I just got 6 happy points. It's much, much easier to think about. Utility is defined as the satisfaction or happiness a person gets from consuming a good or service. Jose is buying t-shirts and movies. Presumably he would be going to a theater under more normal times. But here, maybe he's ordering movies on demand so that he can't reuse them indefinitely. So what do these utility points mean in the total utility column? Nothing. They're entirely subjective. If I ask you, hey, you, how many utility points does your laptop give you? I literally cannot argue with the answer. It's impossible. Utility is a completely subjective scale, and it's individual to the person. Your utility function is it's indirectly observable based on the choices you make, but you probably don't know it. You just know that when you get something that makes you happy, your brain goes and it makes you smile, right? Um, so we're basically trying to put numbers on very subjective feelings. And we're going to assume that the functions that we have basically describe how people's happiness is measured. Um, there are going to be quibbles here. First of all, Jose's utility function is probably not your utility function. Don't get too bogged down with the specifics. We're going to talk about some broad trends here, right? And focus on the broad trends. So Jose's got a budget. You guys all calculated budget constraints way, way back in the first unit. Jose is going to collect t-shirts and watch movies. He's got a budget constraint here, movies on the vertical, t-shirts on the horizontal. And we've got a bunch of feasible combinations. Here, we can't graph this ourselves because we don't know what the prices of movies and t-shirts or what Jose's budget is, but this is totally normal. right? This looks exactly like the budget constraints you guys were drawing. It's linear because there's only one resource being used here. That's Jose's money. Of course, Jose's time is going to be a factor here as well, but we're going to abstract away from that for the moment. Utility tends to increase, but it increases at a decreasing rate. It's got that downward inflection. So total utility goes up, but it goes up more and more slowly. You can take a look at any consumption bundle and calculate the total utility just by adding up the utils for each of those goods. So here, I'll go back a couple of slides. We want a bundle of 3 t-shirts and 2 movies. Okay, 3 t-shirts gives us 63 utils, and 2 movies gives us 31 utils. So we don't have to do anything fancy with these. We're just going to add them up because utility is additive. So 63 utils plus 31 utils means that that bundle, 3 t-shirts and 2 movies, gives Jose 94 happy points. Now, what's going to be more interesting to us isn't the size of these numbers, because I'm never going to be able to ask you an exam question that says, how many utils did taking this exam provide for you? And give you answers like 6, 12, 19, 24. Right? That's not a sensible question. What really is important isn't the level of utility, but it's how it's changing. And when things are changing, we say that they're changing at the margin. Marginal utility is about asking what happens if we get a little more or a little less of something. So marginal utility measures how much is our utility going to change if we consume one more unit. A lot of you guys did really well on the problem on the first problem set where you were calculating marginal grade improvements. That just asked you how many points you got from studying an extra hour. All right, that's exactly the same concept we're working with here. Marginal utility is the change in total utility divided by the change in quantity. So what's interesting about this is that a slope is the change in your output variable over the change in your input variable. So this marginal utility is change in output over change in input, because when you consume a good, you create utility. So marginal utility is the slope of the total utility function. Marginal anything always going to be the slope of whatever it's the marginal for. So let's go ahead and calculate out some marginal utility here. I'm going to go ahead and calculate out the marginal utility for t-shirts, right? So the way I got this here is, let me just get out the pen. I know you're all super excited about the pen again. What I did to get this number is I took the difference of 43 and 22, and I subtracted 22 from 43, and I saw that utility went up by 21 points when I consumed a second t-shirt. Then, let me just change colors here for greater clarity. For the third t-shirt, I said, okay, I went from 43 to 63. 63 minus 43 is 20. So I just subtracted the previous unit. Let's go ahead and do that one more time. Yeah, let's go with lavender. Why not? And then I had, for my fourth t-shirt, I had total utility of 63 from 3 t-shirts, 81 from a fourth t-shirt. So the fourth t-shirt is worth 18 utility points. Gives me 18 happy points. Happy points go. You can verify the rest of that. Go ahead and calculate these numbers out on your own if you want to double check. But go ahead and fill in the marginal utility from movies. Go ahead and pause the video right now. All right. If you calculated out numbers that look like this, you did a great job. If your numbers were close, but you might have had a fat finger error or something, no big deal. The big thing to keep in mind here is that what's happening to marginal utility? Even though utility is going up, marginal utility is going down. Do you guys remember when we talked about diminishing marginal returns? Yeah, that's what we're looking at here. Marginal utility tends to decrease as consumption of a good increases. Remember, one of our big deals here is that more of something can be good, but the next unit is never as good as the previous unit was. We use the example of pizza, we use the example of Halloween candy. You can come up with all kinds of examples here. Not that any of you have ever drank alcohol to excess, but oh boy, that the difference between the first drink and like the 11th beer, oh man, big difference in how happy they make you. Diminishing marginal utility describes why sometimes we can just kind of be satisfied with what we've consumed. It's why you don't sit down and go, ooh, an orange, ooh, a second orange, and then just, ooh, a 33rd orange. It's why you become sufficiently satisfied with what you've consumed. I have a friend who jokes that he does not have diminishing marginal utility in t-shirts. He buys every charity t-shirt, every wrestler t-shirt, every band t-shirt he's ever seen, and his wife is frankly getting very sick of it. The friend is not me, by the way. Um, Thing to look at here, I graphed the total utility. You can see in blue, it's utility from t-shirts. In yellow, it's utility from movies. And both of them, if you kind of lean back and squint a little bit, you can see these are not straight lines. They illustrate that little downward bending. If you don't believe me, go ahead and hold a ruler or like the side of your textbook or something up against the screen, and you can see that there is some concavity to each of these functions. So now that we've talked about what utility is and how you calculate marginal utility, you should be able to answer these questions. What's utility and its connection to consumer behavior? How do you calculate total utility of a collection of goods and services? What's the difference between total and marginal utility? And you should be able to contrast and compute marginal utility and total utility.